Every 50 years, the most powerful civilizations of the galaxy gathered for a legendary event known as the Galactic Combat Trials. It wasn't war. It wasn't revenge. It was a tradition older than many star systems, where each species sent its best warrior to prove their strength, skill, and honor. The trials were not only a test of power, but a chance to gain respect and influence in the galaxy. Entire worlds watched these matches as if they were sacred rituals, and the names of the winners echoed across space for decades. Among the expected champions this year were the mighty Gorlax, a species with armor-like skin and fists that could crack moons. The Veltrians, fast as lightning and nearly impossible to catch, were crowd favorites, and the psychic Naraxi, who could crush minds without lifting a claw, were already being predicted as finalists. These were the names everyone knew, and no one questioned their place in the top ranks. But something strange happened during the announcement ceremony. As holograms of the competitors appeared across the arena, showing off their unique forms and legendary records, a new name flickered onto the list: humans. The moment that name appeared, a wave of confusion spread among the spectators. Whispers grew louder, some filled with laughter, others with curiosity. Few had even seen a real human, and those who had thought of them as emotional, unpredictable, and technologically behind. They didn't have advanced psychic weapons or gravity-bending powers. They didn't have claws, tentacles, or armor scales. They were soft, two-legged creatures from a small blue planet at the edge of a forgotten spiral arm. Many couldn't believe it. A mistake, perhaps? A joke? But the organizers confirmed it. The humans had officially entered the tournament. While the galaxy debated, questioned, and even mocked the idea, the humans remained silent. Their small ship, barely the size of a Gorlak transport pod, landed without any ceremony. No grand entrances, no music, no glowing banners. Just a small team, calm and focused. Their leader, a woman named Commander Elira. The others with her spread out, preparing in their own quiet way. They didn't talk much. They didn't argue. They just observed everything: the terrain, the layout of the arena, the behavior of other species. Unlike the others, they weren't here to show off. They were here to understand. The first match of the trials was announced the next day. It would be a Veltrian champion, Zake of the Wind Fang, against a human named Captain Rains. The Veltrian had won his last 12 duels in under 10 seconds, using pure speed and bladed limbs. Many placed their bets immediately. It wasn't just confidence, it was logic. No one thought a human could keep up with a Veltrian, let alone defeat one. When both fighters entered the arena, the difference in style was impossible to ignore. Zayek leapt and twisted in the air, slicing the wind with sharp motions, while Rains stood still, his hands by his side, eyes calm but alert. Some spectators booed. Some laughed. Others felt second-hand embarrassment. Then the signal to begin echoed through the sky, and the Veltrian vanished in a blur. He shot forward with incredible speed, aiming straight for Rains's throat. But just before contact, the human leaned slightly to the side, as if he already knew where the attack would land. The Veltrian stumbled past, confused for a split second, and that was all Rains needed. With one sharp movement, he struck the back of Zayek's head, and the Veltrian collapsed unconscious. Gasps filled the arena. Some aliens stood, mouths open. Others looked at their screens, unsure if there was a glitch. The match had lasted only a few seconds, and the human had barely moved. The judges reviewed the footage in silence. It was clear the human had dodged with perfect timing and landed a single precise blow. No weapons, no tricks. Just timing, control, and awareness. When they declared Rains the winner, the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't know what to feel. Some called it luck. Others called it a mistake. A few started to watch the humans more closely. Something wasn't right. As the matches continued, the humans began to surprise the galaxy again and again. Each fighter was different. One used brute strength, lifting a Gorlak and throwing him over the arena wall. Another used clever traps and distractions to defeat a heavily armored opponent. One human simply stood still and waited, forcing his enemy to become frustrated and careless. They weren't just fighting with fists or weapons, they were thinking, watching, learning, and adapting. The galaxy had seen strength before, but this was something different. It didn't stop. Some species claimed the humans were hiding advanced tech. Others believed the judges were helping them. But behind the noise, a quiet truth was taking root in the minds of the observant. The humans were not here by accident. They had studied every species. They had trained for every weakness. And they didn't care about fame or applause. They cared only about the fight. Their warriors didn't celebrate their wins. They simply nodded, helped their defeated enemies up, and walked away. By the end of the first round, the humans had won all their matches. The scoreboard didn't lie. Every major race had lost at least one fighter to the newcomers. And yet, none of the humans had spoken more than a few words in public. Some reporters tried to interview them. Some ambassadors offered congratulations or even alliances. The humans declined politely, saying only that the trials were not over yet. Commander Elira remained silent during press sessions, but her presence was enough to make others nervous. Something about her eyes, calm and cold, made the more arrogant species feel uneasy. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was simply focused, like someone who had a mission far beyond trophies. Behind the scenes, panic began to grow. Species who once laughed now demanded private strategy sessions. They studied recordings of every human movement, trying to find flaws. But they found none. The humans were not perfect, but they were unpredictable. That made them dangerous. And worst of all, they learned fast. Each match made them stronger, smarter, and harder to beat. The Veltrians, the Naraxi, even the mighty Gorlax all began to realize something terrifying. The humans were not just participants. They were challengers. And if things continued this way, they might be something worse, winners. And so, as the next round approached, the galaxy watched with a new feeling. Not laughter, not pity, but something colder, sharper fear. The second round of the galactic combat trials arrived faster than anyone expected, and the air inside the arena felt heavier than before. There were no more jokes, no more bets placed with blind confidence. Everyone had seen the humans in action. They weren't loud, flashy, or aggressive, but they were dangerous. Their silence had become a weapon. Their calmness had turned into fear for others. Now, the first battle of the round was about to begin, and the galaxy was watching with more than just curiosity. They were watching with caution. The Veltrians, after losing their fastest warrior, were desperate to reclaim their honor. They pushed forward one of their deadliest duelists, Threx the Swift Reaper, a veteran fighter who had once torn through 5 enemies in a single trial. His claws were sharp enough to cut through armor, and his body moved like shadows on water fluid, fast, and nearly impossible to track. He had never lost a fight. He didn't even speak before battles. His actions were enough. The crowd buzzed as he stepped into the arena, eyes glowing faint blue, his skin pulsing with energy. Many still believed the humans couldn't survive a second encounter. They thought the first round had been strange luck, but this was going to be different. On the other side of the arena, walking alone and without armor, came the human challenger Lieutenant Dax Monroe. His file showed a long military background on Earth, decorated with experience in jungle warfare, zero-gravity combat, and urban infiltration. But none of that mattered now. This was not Earth. This was a stage where entire species proved their worth. Dax wore a plain uniform, no weapon in sight, and his expression was blank. No one could read him. The announcers tried to build suspense, describing Threx's victories and Dax's unknown reputation, but Dax just stood there, hands behind his back, like a teacher waiting for a late student. There was something about the way he watched his opponent that made a few spectators shift in their seats. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't excited. He was just waiting. And then the signal rang out. The first battle of the second round had officially begun. Threx moved instantly, his body vanishing into a blur of speed, his claws extended to slice through the human's neck. The crowd leaned forward, certain they were about to witness blood. But as Threx reached his target, Dax simply ducked. It wasn't a quick dodge. It wasn't dramatic. It was smooth, like he had already planned it before the attack started. Threx missed. He spun around, attacking again, this time from the left, but Dax stepped back, letting the claws cut through the air just inches away. For several seconds, Threx moved like a storm, slashing, jumping, twisting in midair. But nothing connected. Dax wasn't even fighting back. He was observing, moving just enough to avoid damage, as if he was studying a wild animal in its cage. Understand how? His speed, his power, his legendary skills, none of them worked. Dax didn't need claws. He didn't need speed. He needed only timing, patience, and the ability to read his opponent like a book. In less than 2 minutes, the battle was over. Dax didn't wait for applause. He stepped back, let the medical drones collect Threx, and left the arena without a single word. It was quiet. Too quiet. Even the crowd didn't know how to react. This wasn't the drama they had expected. It was something deeper. Something colder. Behind the scenes, the other species held emergency meetings. The Neuraxi leaders sent psychic probes to understand human brain patterns. The Gorlax reviewed Earth's military history. The insectoid Klicknar started scanning old signals from Earth, trying to find hidden training programs. Fear turned into desperation. These humans weren't just fighters. They were planners, thinkers, and students of war. The second battle took place only hours later, and again, a human was involved. This time, it was Sergeant Mia Keller against a reptilian giant from the Scarith Empire. The Scarith fighter was known for acid breath and a spiked tail that could knock over vehicles. The moment the battle started, he unleashed a firestorm of attacks, his tail smashing craters into the ground. But Mia didn't run. She didn't charge. She threw a smoke canister and vanished from sight. What followed was chaos. The Scarith roared, swiped at the smoke, sprayed acid randomly, but nothing landed. Then, one by one, pressure points on his body were struck from the shadows. Legs buckled. Arms failed. Breath shortened. When the smoke cleared, Mia stood on his back, untouched. She bowed and walked off. No celebration. No pride. Just control. One by one, the humans kept winning. But it wasn't their victories that scared the others. It was how they won. Each fight was different. Each human used a new strategy. Some were fast. Some were slow. Some didn't even attack until the very end. The galaxy started to understand something terrifying. Humans didn't just fight with strength. They fought with memory, emotion, and creativity. They didn't follow patterns. They became unpredictable, like storms forming in strange skies. Watching them was like watching a mirror that showed you your own weakness. And so, as the day ended and the scoreboard showed humans advancing again, the fear in the galaxy turned into silence. Species who once dominated the trials now sat in private rooms, whispering about this new threat. They wondered how Earth, a planet so far away, had trained such people. What kind of world created warriors who didn't need armor or weapons to win? What kind of pain had they survived? What kind of history made them this cold and focused? These weren't just competitors. These were reminders that no matter how strong your claws were, how fast your wings flapped, or how loud your empire shouted, there was something far more dangerous out there. A human who knew how to think. A human who knew how to wait. A human who had nothing to prove, only something to protect. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. As the second round of the galactic trials came to an end, whispers turned into warnings, and fear took the shape of silence across the great halls of the Galactic Alliance. Species that once laughed at Earth now refused to speak its name too loudly, as if even mentioning humans would draw their attention. Something had changed, and everyone felt it. It wasn't just the victories humans had claimed, it was the way they won. They didn't rely on brute force, speed, or alien technology. They won with something deeper, something older and more dangerous: strategy, resilience, and will. It was now clear to all that human strength was not just about muscles or fast reflexes. It was a quiet storm that studied everything before it struck. Every opponent had entered the arena with confidence and left with confusion, pain, or fear. The next battles would not just test weapons and bodies, they would test the mind. The next human fighter was Captain Elora Hayes, a former deep space explorer with years of survival on hostile planets, known more for her calm thinking than physical power. She was chosen to face Rovak the Warbeast, a creature made of muscle, bone armor, and endless rage. Rovak was famous for tearing metal apart with his bare hands. In the last trials, he defeated 3 opponents by simply charging through them like a living hammer. His roar could shake buildings, and even the strongest contenders avoided facing him. Many believed Elora would be crushed before she could even speak, but she walked into the arena with no sign of fear. She carried no shield, no weapon, only a single metal rod clipped to her belt. She looked more like a scientist than a warrior, and that confused the audience. But humans had already proven that appearances meant nothing, and now everyone watched with bated breath. The signal sounded, and Rovak charged with his usual fury, pounding the ground with footsteps that made the stadium tremble. But Elora didn't move. Instead, she pulled out her rod and extended it into a long staff, then calmly stepped to the side, letting Rovak crash past her and slam into the wall behind. The crowd gasped, but Elora didn't take advantage of the moment. She stood still again, waiting. Rovak roared and turned, more furious than before, and charged again. Elora dodged once more, using her staff to tap a joint in Rovak's armor as he passed. It was a small touch, not even enough to hurt. But Rovak slowed down slightly. It happened again. Another dodge, another tap, this time on the back of his knee. After 5 minutes of this strange pattern, something became clear. Rovak was starting to limp. His movements became less wild and more clumsy. He was slowing down, confused and angry. The audience began to understand that Elora had been targeting pressure points, weakening Rovak piece by piece, without even looking like she was attacking. Her calm mind had turned a beast into a puzzle, and now that puzzle was falling apart. When Rovak finally collapsed to one knee, roaring in frustration, Elora approached not to finish him, but to offer a hand. The crowd froze. Even Rovak stared in disbelief. She had defeated him not with pain, but with patience. Not with violence, but with understanding. Rovak didn't take her hand, but he bowed his head. That simple gesture sent a wave of shock through the arena. A warbeast bowing to a human. It had never happened before, and the message was clear. Strength alone was no longer enough. In the control rooms above the arena, the trial masters, the hidden leaders who had organized these games for centuries, watched closely. Their records, filled with data from every past combat, showed something unsettling. Humans didn't just adapt to challenges. They learned from them at terrifying speed. No 2 humans fought the same way. Each one adjusted not only to their enemy's abilities, but also to the environment, the timing, and even the audience. They fought with memory and instinct combined, creating something that couldn't be predicted. It was intelligence weaponized. Later that cycle, another human stepped into the ring, Corporal Louis Tran, a communications expert, not a soldier by training. His opponent was Zaret of the Hive, a creature that used psychic illusions to confuse and destroy. Zaret had defeated dozens by making them see false realities, friends turning into enemies, solid ground becoming bottomless pits. But when the battle began, Louis didn't panic. As the illusions swirled around him, and Zaret's mind tricks filled the air with horror, Louis closed his eyes and whispered to himself. He repeated facts, numbers, training memories, even songs from Earth. He built a mental wall, piece by piece, until the illusions faded. Zaret tried harder, but Louis remained calm, using techniques he had learned for radio signal clarity under pressure now applied to the battlefield. In the end, Louis walked through the false world and reached Zaret, not with violence, but with a quiet voice. I know what's real. Zaret collapsed, defeated not by power, but by a mind that refused to break. Across the galaxy, people began to view humans differently. They were no longer the new species from the blue planet. They were something else entirely, beings who saw weakness in strength and power in silence. Children on alien worlds began playing human strategy games. Warriors trained by studying human fights. Diplomats rewrote agreements, realizing Earth might not be so small after all. And in hidden places, some feared what would happen if these humans ever stopped playing fair. But the humans didn't celebrate. They didn't raise flags or chant victory. They returned to their rooms, studied the next battle, and prepared like they always had, knowing the real war wasn't just in the arena. It was in perception, in how the galaxy viewed them. They had already changed the rules. They had shown everyone that survival was not about strength. It was about choice, understanding, and the courage to face fear without becoming it. That was what made them truly dangerous. Not their weapons, not their muscles, but their minds and the will to use them without hesitation. And as the third round loomed, with even stronger opponents waiting, the galaxy held its breath once more. Because now, everyone knew something they couldn't ignore anymore. The humans weren't just here to fight. They were here to win and to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The entire galaxy was watching. Billions of eyes across hundreds of star systems were focused on one place, the central arena of the galactic trials. The final match had arrived, and with it came a silence heavier than any weapon. What started as a simple competition had now become something far greater. At first, the trials were just another show of power among the most advanced species. But when humans entered, everything changed. They didn't just surprise their enemies, they shocked the very foundation of what the galaxy believed about strength, strategy, and fear. Now, the final human, Commander Rhea Morgan, stood alone in the center of the battlefield, facing the one opponent no one had ever beaten, the ancient warlord known as Carex the Eternal, the undefeated champion of 3 centuries. Carex was not only powerful, he was terrifying. A living legend who had crushed champions from every major civilization. His body was a weapon, his mind sharper than any blade, and his will unbreakable. He had ruled the trials for so long that many believed he was invincible. And now, for the first time, Carex looked cautious. Not because Rhea was stronger than him physically, but because she was human, and that word now carried weight far beyond size or strength. The arena was quiet when the match began, and no one moved for several seconds. Then, without warning, Carex lunged forward, his strike fast and deadly. But Rhea had already stepped aside, not reacting with panic but with calculated timing. She had studied every fight Carex ever had, memorized his patterns, and trained her body to respond like a machine, but with human instinct guiding every move. Their battle continued, not like a war between muscles, but like a game of speed and intelligence. Rhea never tried to overpower him. She let him chase, let him attack, and every time he missed, his frustration grew. The audience watched in stunned silence as the champion of centuries was being pulled into a trap he couldn't even see. Rhea moved like water, calm, flowing, unpredictable, and slowly Carex began to realize she wasn't trying to defeat him through violence. She was revealing something deeper. Every move she made forced him to use more strength, more effort, until his age and history began to show. His body, though powerful, carried the weight of time. Hers moved with the hunger of a species that had survived endless wars, disasters, and pain, and still chose to rise. But then something unexpected happened. Carex stepped back and stopped fighting. The arena held its breath. He stared at Rhea, not with anger, but with understanding. And then he spoke, his voice echoing across the Colosseum. "This is not about victory anymore," he said. "This is about truth." His words stunned the crowd. For years, these trials were meant to keep order, to show which species deserved respect. But in all my time, I have never seen anything like you. You fight without hate. You endure without pride. And you win without seeking glory. Tell me, Rhea Morgan, what do you really want? The question hit harder than any weapon. Rhea lowered her fists, looked around the arena filled with alien leaders, soldiers, and watchers, and finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. "We didn't come to prove we're the strongest. We came to show that you've been looking at strength the wrong way. Strength isn't about who hits the hardest. It's about who stands back up, who learns, who protects others even when it's easier to destroy. We didn't come to fight. We came to warn." A wave of confusion swept the crowd. Carex narrowed his eyes. "Warn us? About what?" Rhea took a deep breath. About yourselves. About this system you've built. A galaxy where peace is decided by violence. Where diplomacy is based on fear. You test each other with war, but never learn. We saw this before on our own planet, and we nearly destroyed ourselves. But we learned too late. You still have time. There was no cheering, no noise, just silence as her words echoed like thunder across every screen, every speaker, every ship listening. The trials had never been interrupted like this, never turned into a message. But Rhea continued. Humanity is not perfect. We are broken, flawed, and dangerous. But we remember what it means to fall. And we know what it takes to change. If you keep using strength to silence weakness, one day you'll create something you cannot control. And that day will be the end of all of us. K-Rex stood still, eyes searching her face for lies. But there were none. Only truth. And after a long pause, he raised his arm and dropped his weapon to the ground. Then let this match end with no victor, he said. Let it end with understanding. The moment he said that, the arena erupted not with violence, but with something new. Respect. Even the trial masters, hidden in their high towers, had no words. The final match had ended not with blood, but with truth. And across the galaxy, something began to... On distant planets, leaders called emergency meetings. On warships, soldiers discussed peace for the first time. On colonies, alien children asked their parents why humans were so different. And in the center of it all stood Commander Rhea Morgan, who had fought not with fists, but with vision. She hadn't won a match. She had changed a system. From that day on, the galactic trials were no longer just battles. They became a place of dialogue, of challenge. Yes, but also of growth. And humans? They were no longer seen as the weakest newcomers. They were seen as something far more dangerous, the ones who made others think. And that, more than any weapon, was the true shock the galaxy never saw coming. The stars above the silent battlefield still burned bright, but the galaxy felt different now, quieter, like it was holding its breath. After the events of the galactic trials, where a single human had turned a brutal tradition into a lesson of truth, something had begun to change across the universe. No one had expected it, not the Council of Elders who had ruled in secrecy for centuries, not the war-bred species who believed fear kept order, and certainly not the common people, who for so long had accepted power as the only voice that mattered. But when Commander Rhea Morgan stepped off that final arena floor and disappeared into the shadows of history, her words did not vanish with her. Instead, they spread like wildfire across star systems, carried by whispers, recordings, and the awe of those who had witnessed something far more powerful than a simple match and awakening. It wasn't just that she had refused to finish a fight. It was the reason behind it. Her message struck deep, that the galaxy was building itself on a mistake, worshipping destruction, calling it strength, and ignoring what true strength looked like: mercy, understanding, endurance. On the planet of X-Cyrene, the warrior caste that had trained since birth paused their programs to study Earth's history. On Grolith, a planet known for producing the most ruthless bounty hunters, the masters of combat schools rewrote their lessons to include strategy, patience, and restraint. And on the moon stations orbiting Valter Prime, children began learning not just alien languages, but human philosophy, something that had never been done before. But not everyone welcomed this change. In the cold chambers of the Outer Ring Council, the oldest and most secretive species met in panic. The humans, they argued, were too dangerous, not because of their weapons, but because of their ideas. Ideas were harder to stop. You couldn't shoot them, couldn't lock them in cells. Once an idea reached the hearts of the people, it spread in ways no fleet could track. And the idea that humans had planted was terrifying, that perhaps the galaxy needed to change. So quietly, the Council approved a mission, a silent operation meant to erase the influence of Earth before it could grow further. They didn't plan a war. No, that would only confirm the humans' warning. They planned to erase history itself. Data archives across the galaxy began to show signs of tampering. Recordings of the trials were corrupted or deleted. Messages praising humans mysteriously vanished. Witnesses to the final battle were interrogated, silenced, or made to disappear. Entire stations were shut down under the excuse of energy failures, but it was already too late. Because a story doesn't need a database to survive, it only needs one person to remember, and across every world, there were thousands. They had seen something that shook them to the core, and they could not forget it, even if they tried. The truth was alive in them. The more the council tried to erase, the more people grew suspicious. What are they hiding? Why are they afraid of the truth? And with every question, the legend of Rhea Morgan grew. In time, her name became more than a name, it became a symbol. Underground networks began sharing hidden copies of her final speech. Artists painted her standing unarmed before the ancient champion. Writers composed stories, songs, and poems about a human who didn't win through blood, but through vision. The galaxy, once ruled by silence and obedience, was now speaking in 1,000 voices. Protests began on colonies that had never dared question authority. Peace marches appeared on war-hardened planets. And even in the military academies of the great empires, students asked a dangerous question: what if humans are right? This wave of thought became impossible to stop. Some tried to twist it, to weaponize it, to use humanity's story for their own agendas, but it never worked, because the heart of the story was not conquest, it was change. Meanwhile, Earth remained quiet. The humans, knowing they had left an unforgettable impact, didn't expand their territory or send fleets to demand loyalty. Instead, they listened, observed, and offered help when asked. It was their patience that frightened the powers even more. It showed that their message had been real. They didn't want to rule, they wanted peace to be possible, even in a galaxy built on fear. Years passed, and what began as a battle in one arena became a movement that no one could predict. Eventually, even the Outer Ring Council collapsed under the weight of its own secrets. When their attempt to rewrite the past was exposed, their authority crumbled. The new leaders who rose from the ashes were not warriors, they were thinkers, diplomats, and yes, even humans. A new alliance formed based on mutual respect, not dominance. And at its center, in every hall, every book, and every conversation, one name echoed like a reminder: Rhea Morgan. Statues were built, not in her honor, but in memory of the moment everything changed. And etched into every statue, in every language known, were the same words: true strength is not in how hard you strike, but in how deeply you understand. That single sentence became a new code, a new way of thinking for billions. And though Rhea herself was never seen again, some say she walks among the stars, watching quietly as the galaxy becomes something new, something better. One thing was certain now: wars may be forgotten, empires may fall, but the story of the human who refused to fight for pride and changed everything would live on forever. Because from that moment on, no matter how many centuries passed, no matter how many stars burned out, the galaxy would never forget.